Hi, my name is Neil Kelleher. In this video I'll be going over some variations of pigeon yoga pose, both for beginners and slightly more advanced practitioners. Part of the some of the variations I'll include the basic both hip lifted and hip on the floor variations, also bending forwards and bending backwards, and I'll also include a variation I call screaming pigeon, which is actually a hip on the floor variation, and that too can be done both with the hip both upright and with the chest down. Basic setup for pigeon: if you start with your legs crossed, you can just reach one leg back behind you, and what I'd suggest is important is having the front knee out to the side of the hip. So rather than being inside the front hip, position the front knee outside of the hip. And this is both with the hip lifted and with the, this is both with the hip down on the floor and with the hip lifted. For the back leg, try to reach your back leg straight back. If you're using a mat, try to position your back leg parallel to the long edge of your mat. And for now, because the general reason for using this pose is to increase hip flexibility in external rotation, what I'd suggest, you can start with the front foot further back behind the knee. As you get better at the pose, you can move the foot further forward. So for now, start with the foot back, sort of behind the knee. So from this view, rather than having it forward like so, have the foot back so the knee is bent at about, it's actually bent quite a lot. So one of the usual modifications is to stick a block under the butt like so. And one of the main reasons for this is if you have sore knees or knees which this pose hurts. And I'll go over some. So one of the so if you have knee problems, you might not want to do this pose, or I had to teach with a knee injury, and so my way of getting into the pose was to move slowly and carefully into the pose and out of the pose. So if you do have a knee injury, you can experiment with moving slowly into the pose. If the knee hurts, then exit the pose, don't do it. But you may find that if you move into the pose slowly, you can get into the pose without hurting your knee. And another point, depending on how high your pelvis is, you may find, try not to have the foot flexed. If your pelvis is too high, having the foot flexed may cause the shin to roll a bit and put extra stress on your knee. So hopefully you can see that. So try to have your foot flat on the floor, the top of the foot flat on the floor, so the front of the ankle is open. Now then, one basic exercise I teach, and this can help you move away from having to use the block, is to practice lifting the hip. And one of the ways to do this is to first have the hands on the floor and then simply lift the hip and then lower it. And in this variation, you're using your hands to support the upper body. The next trick is to press the knee down and focus on lifting your hip without using your hands. So from the front, so again, notice I have my knee outside my hip. You can have the arms out to the side, slowly lift and slowly lower. And in order to do this actively, use the outer thigh muscles, use the hip muscles to press the knee down into the floor. The more you press down, the easier it is to lift the hip. And you may find you lean your upper body slightly away from the knee so that your center of gravity is, where is it? Somewhere over the leg, so you can use your knee to lift your hips. You may find leaning over that way, you find a point where it's reasonably easy to lift your hip without too much effort, and then from there you can place your hands back on the floor. Another exercise you can do, and this again is to train the awareness of the front leg, using the leg to support the pose, is to lift the knee with the hands on the floor, put the knee down, press the knee down, lift the hands. Put the hands on the floor, press the hands down, slowly lift the knee. Notice how your arms are bearing the weight of your body. Touch the knee to the floor. Slowly press the knee down. Now notice that your leg is bearing the weight of the body and you can lift the hands. So that is another exercise you can do as a warm-up to pigeon pose, or that you can use to teach pigeon pose prior to actually doing the actual pose. So one variation of pigeon we'll go into with the hip lifted is to do a back bend, and with that, so with one leg forward, knee outside the hip, you can reach the other leg back. Try to orient the back leg so that the knee points straight down. And again, have the leg, rather than being out to the side, try to orient the leg so that if you're using the yoga mat, your leg is parallel to the edge of the yoga mat. Now with your hip lifted, you're pressing the knee down. What you can try to do, you can tilt side to side. Try to find a position where your pelvis is level from left to right. So not this way with the front leg hip dipped, and not this way with the back leg hip dipped. So try to find a place where your pelvis is even from left to right. From there, you can use your hands. Press your hands into the floor to move your rib cage up and also back. And if you ever done downward dog, the idea, this is similar in that the idea is rather than just relaxing your spine, use your spinal erectors. So you can start off with your lumbar spinal erectors, activate those to bend your lumbar spine backwards, and then work your way up the spine. Try to activate so going upwards towards your neck, activate your thoracic spinal erectors to bend the thoracic spine backwards. And for the neck, I'd suggest just draw your ears away from your shoulders so that the sides of your neck are long. And for now, rather than lifting the chin, just pull the chin down. Try to open up the back of the neck. So lumbar spine, activate the spinal erectors, bend it backwards. Thoracic spine, again, activate spinal erectors, bend the thoracic spine backwards. As you do so, you'll notice that your chest opens and expands. And when you bend the lumbar spine backwards, you'll actually be lengthening your belly. Now from there, squeeze your butt cheek, this leg, the back leg, squeeze your butt cheek, activate the back of the thigh. So all of this is almost pulling up on the back thigh, and that you may find will help your pelvis to sink down. And that can be the goal in upright pigeon. Your front leg's the foundation, your pelvis is moving back and down, staying level, and so that your pelvis has room to move back and down, the back leg reaches back. So again, use your arms, lift your rib cage, push it back, use your spinal erectors, bend the spine backwards, activate the back of the back leg. So here, butt cheek, thigh, you can pull the thigh bone up, at the same time push the back foot back. Hold for any number of breaths, breathe deeply, inhale, exhale. You can push this knee down a little bit, inhale, try to reach back a little bit further, and exhale, and relax. And then from there, you can move into the other side. Another variation of pigeon with the hip lifted, with the pelvis level from left to right, is to bend forwards. And here again, you can start with the foot back. And actually, I like to do this in a set of 3. So start with the foot back behind the knee, maybe even with the pelvis, maybe a little bit more forward. You can play around with this. So lift the hip, reach the back leg back, and lie down. So initially, you can use your hands, rest your chest on your shin. You can put your chin on the floor, and then from there, relax your chest down and reach your hands forward. It can be a little bit like downward dog. Rather than reaching your hands all the way forward, bring them back just a touch so your elbows bend a little bit. And then straighten your elbows so that your hands push forwards. But rather than letting your hands slip forward, use your arms, use your shoulders to push your rib cage back. So here again, the emphasis is on reaching back, away from your hands, away from your knee. So here you can lengthen the neck first. Use your shoulders to push your rib cage and pelvis back away from the knee. Again, keep your pelvis level from left to right, so rather than sinking the front leg hip or sinking the back leg hip, try to keep your pelvis level. You can even lift the back knee. You can have the toes reaching back, or you can tuck them under. And you don't even have to have the knee straight. You can lift the knee just enough so that the weight of the leg helps your pelvis to sink down. Hold for any number of breaths, and before going on to the other side, what you can do is move the foot forward a little bit more. So this will increase the hip stretch. It will make the pose a little bit more intense, but that's one of the reasons why I like to start with the foot further back, so you can gradually work towards the having the shin parallel to the front of your mat. So from here again, lift carefully, even if your knees don't hurt. Move carefully to protect the integrity of your knees so that you're not messing it up for future use. Press the knee down. Lift the hip. Gently, slowly make the pelvis level from left to right, and gently, slowly point the back knee down. Slowly lower down. If it's too intense, rest on your elbows for a few breaths. Keep your front knee pressing down. Then when you're ready, you can widen the elbows out to the side, chin to the floor, or if need be, rest your chin on a yoga mat if it's too painful to rest your chin on the floor if you can't reach the floor. From there again, reach your hands forwards and push your hands forwards against the floor so your rib cage moves back, so that your pelvis moves back. So you can imagine creating space or distance between your pelvis and your knee. Once you've done it with the foot about all the way back and midway forward, then you can have the shin all the way forward, shin parallel to the mat, to the front of your mat. One of my students likes to have his foot even further forward. Play around with it, but I'd suggest having the shin parallel to the front of your mat can be sort of like the goal position, the ultimate stretch. From there, lift your hip, go slowly, especially in this position, press your knee down. I like to hold this position for a few breaths, and then you can try placing your elbows on the floor, point your back knee down, and then slowly either widen your elbows to sink your chest, move the hands out to the side to sink the chest is another option. Chin on the floor, can move your hands forward. Here again, my front leg hip is almost on the floor. It's a little bit difficult to prevent, but you can lift the back knee so that the weight of this leg helps the back leg hip to sink down. And again, you can push forward with the hands so that the rib cage reaches back. So that's a 3-step low pigeon variation. In all cases, keep the work at keeping the pelvis level from left to right and gradually work towards a full version. If you are quite comfortable with this position, you might find that you can jump straight ahead to the shin parallel to the front of your mat version. One of my favorite versions of pigeon is what I call screaming pigeon. This is where the front leg hip is on the floor. And to start off with, so straight away the front leg shin can be parallel to the front of the mat. The hip stays on the floor, and I'll do a low version first. And what this can look like from the front is initially just let your chest sink down. You can rest your you can rest your chest on the thigh. You can have the elbows on the floor here, or you can reach the arms forward now to the side. Use the front leg arm to help push the rib cage a little bit to the left. Now from there, the stretch comes. If you lift your chest, you may find that you get quite a deep stretch just by trying to reach your chest to your thigh. But to increase the stretch, what you can do from there is lift up, move your front hand inward slightly towards your knee, and then use this arm, bend the elbow, use this arm to push your body towards your front leg foot, like so. You can go slowly, keep this knee pushing down, also push it forward a little bit like you're trying to push your knee away from the hip. So from here you can gradually work as if trying to smell your front foot. So you could start high and go low, use the arm as a pivot so that you fall out and down towards your foot, or you can bend the elbow, Like so. Bend both elbows and then use your front leg arm to push your rib cage to the side while staying low to the floor. This can be a little bit more challenging. As you reach, get closer to your foot, you can move your hand in so that you have more room to push yourself further. Try to lengthen both sides of your neck, try to open your chest, and remember, keep the front leg knee pushing forward and down. You can work at getting your face to your foot. You can also try and get your shoulder toward the foot for an even more intense stretch. For the upright version of Screaming Pigeon, same setup, front shin parallel to the front of your mat, hip on the floor. Use your front leg hands to push your rib cage upright. So from this position with the hip on the floor, the back leg hip is naturally lifted. So from here you can use your front leg arm to lift your rib cage and then use it to push your rib cage towards the back leg side. Excuse me. As you push your rib cage to the side, you can gently point your rear knee downwards. If it doesn't point down straight away, that's fine because this hip is lifted, but you can work towards pointing the back knee down. From here, bend your lumbar spine backwards, bend your thoracic spine backwards. Additionally, try lifting your back ribs. You may find that gives you room to bend your spine backwards more. Now you can just hold this pose, use your arms to push your rib cage up and back and gently push toward the back leg side. You can lift the back knee. An additional activity you can do is to turn towards your front leg side. In this case, use both arms to push your rib cage back away from the front leg side. So pull these side ribs back, this side rib cage forward gently. You can even lengthen the neck and try and look over your shoulder. And then from there, turn to the other side. Keep this hip on the floor, try to get the back leg hip down, and you may find it helps to lift the knee. And then from here, this time, this rib cage, this side of the rib cage moves forward, this side of the rib cage moves back. Try to keep your neck long, look back over your left shoulder. So there are a couple of variations of pigeon. Hopefully you'll find that helpful for increasing hip flexibility or just making it easier to do pigeon pose in general. Probably the most important point I would suggest is actively pressing the front leg knee down so that your front hip, so your front leg is stable. So the idea there is it's stable, but it's also slowly releasing or lengthening at the same time. So you're stabilizing the front hip as well as enabling it to stretch a little bit deeper into the pose. Apart from that, I think that's it. If you have any questions, please use the comment form on my website, sensationalyogaposes.com. Thank you very much.